Beverly smirked, thinking they were on her side. "And now," she said proudly, "we will hear the defense before we proceed to vote." Eli stood. He walked forward calm, composed, and with that envelope in his hand. When he reached the microphone, he didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "Thank you, Beverly. Before I defend myself, I'd like to share some facts about our honorable HOA president." The crowd stilled. Eli opened the folder and lifted out the permit history sheet. "This is a certified copy from the county clerk," he continued, holding it high. "It shows that Beverly Morgan has, for over 15 years, maintained several non-registered structures on her property, violating the very HOA codes she fines others for." People gasped. Dana whispered, "Boom." Eli continued, "Section 8.4 of the Charter states that failure to report significant structural changes may result in fines or, according to your own latest amendment, removal proceedings." He turned to Beverly. "So before you vote on removing my family, I respectfully request a new motion to remove Beverly Morgan for code violations, financial misconduct, and abuse of power." The crowd erupted. Phones rose. Laughter burst. Beverly went pale. You can't do this," she shrieked. "Yes, he can," said a voice from behind the crowd. Sheriff Lowell stepped forward again, this time in full uniform, badge gleaming. "The HOA charter is legal," he said, "and public. And now that Mr. Walker has provided verifiable evidence of long-term violations, this community has the right to vote." Beverly stood there, shaking. "No one will vote for that," she hissed. "They need me." Sheriff Lowell raised an eyebrow. "Let's find out." One by one, hands went up to remove Beverly. Not even her closest board members supported her this time. Her second-in-command turned his chair slightly, avoiding her gaze as he raised his hand too. When the count was done, it wasn't even close. Beverly Morgan, president of the HOA for 17 years, was officially removed by unanimous vote. The sheriff stepped forward. "Ms. Morgan, you are now under investigation for unregistered rental income, misuse of HOA funds, and failure to disclose structural modifications." "You can't do this," she cried. "I built this neighborhood." "And now," he said, "it's cleaning itself." The board fell apart after that. 2 more members resigned. The HOA was forced to hold emergency elections. Guess who was nominated? Eli refused, of course. But the symbol mattered. He had gone from being labeled a threat to being seen as a protector. The neighborhood shifted after that. Kids waved when Eli jogged by. People invited him for barbecues. Dana started a garden club with the same women who used to avoid her. And as for the Airbnb guest house, it got shut down permanently. 2 weeks later, we stood at the edge of our backyard, looking at the land we almost lost. Dana leaned against Eli and whispered, "I've never been prouder of you." He smiled gently, arms folded. But then he said, "I still don't trust peace. That's too quiet." "Why not?" I asked. He looked at the gate. "Because quiet is when people start plotting again." He wasn't wrong. Because just as we turned to head back inside, a black SUV pulled up at the far edge of the neighborhood. Windows tinted. No plates. It wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't a friend. It was someone from his past. And Eli's face changed. The final storm had arrived. Eli stepped forward slowly. The whole room watched. Rick backed up, panicking. "I'm not hiding anything," Eli said quietly. "I've been open about my past." He turned to the neighbors. "I've served. I've lost friends. I've seen the worst of humanity. But I came home to heal, not to fight." He glanced back at Rick. "But some people don't know how to stop starting wars." Rick opened his mouth, but then something incredible happened. One by one, neighbors began standing up. First was Mrs. Green, the quiet woman who always walked her dog in the mornings. "My nephew came back from Iraq and never got welcomed home. This man helped my dog when she got stuck under my deck. He's a good soul. You people are the ones causing problems." Then the Gonzalez twins' mom rose. "My son has nightmares from school shootings. But he says Eli makes him feel safe when he sees him outside. That's the kind of neighbor we need." Then came Mr. Henderson. "Carla, A young dad who said Eli helped him change a tire in the rain. And just like that, the room was no longer divided. It was united. Behind Eli, Beverly's face twisted. She tried to speak, but no one was listening. Rick was sweating, visibly panicked. And then suddenly, from the back of a room, a man in uniform stepped forward. A real one. Sheriff's badge on his chest. Duty belt on his waist. Calm power in his walk. "Good evening," he said, removing his cap. Everyone turned. "My name is Sheriff Lowell. I've received multiple complaints about this HOA, particularly about Mr. Rick Sanders impersonating law enforcement and carrying an unlicensed firearm." Rick froze. Lowell continued, "Earlier this week, we were sent footage of Mr. Sanders drawing a weapon on an unarmed civilian." Beverly jumped in. "That man is not just any civilian. He's a trained killer." The sheriff turned to her. "Ma'am, your security officer is under criminal investigation. Right now. That's why I'm here." You could hear the oxygen leave the room. Rick backed away. It was self-defense. "I thought he was going to—" "You thought wrong," Sheriff Lowell cut in. "You pulled a gun on a man who hadn't threatened you. You are not licensed. You are not deputized. You are not a law enforcement officer." Rick looked at Beverly, begging with his eyes. She stepped back. Sheriff Lowell turned to Eli. "I'm sorry you had to go through that, son. And thank you for staying calm when most wouldn't have." Then, without a word, he slapped cuffs on Rick and let him out. The room burst into whispers. Eli just stood there. Not proud. Not smug. Just silent. Like always. That night, the HOA board called for a recess on the vote. Translation: they were scrambling to recover. The videos from the meeting were already online. And within hours, social media was ablaze. Hashtag Justice for Eli was trending in the state. Veterans groups shared the story. News outlets called asking for statements. And people started digging into the HOA's shady history. Turns out, this wasn't the first time they'd harassed a military veteran. A few years back, a retired Marine had moved out after similar safety complaints. Except this time, they messed with the wrong one. By Monday morning, the HOA board was in chaos. 2 members resigned. A third claimed she had no knowledge of the armed incident. Beverly? She doubled down. She sent out an emergency HOA email accusing us of organizing a campaign to slander the board's reputation. But then, we got a letter. Not from the HOA. From a lawyer. It was addressed to Eli and stamped with a military seal. Inside it read, "Dear Mr. Walker, your recent actions, captured on public video, reflect the highest standards of restraint and tactical discipline expected from our retired servicemen. The department is proud to see your training used in defense, not destruction. We would like to formally invite you to speak at the upcoming National Veterans Conference about transition, trauma, and what it means to come home. We honor your service and your strength." Eli folded the letter, looked up, and said, "Guess they finally noticed." We were still facing the threat of being removed from our home. Beverly wasn't letting go. Her pride had been wounded, and wounded pride is dangerous. The HOA had now issued a final hearing date, an attempt to remove us under a newly added safety clause pushed through by Beverly's remaining allies. The hearing would take place in 1 week. They were rushing it, hoping we wouldn't fight. But they didn't know. We had more than just a fight coming. Eli had a plan, and it started with a quiet drive down to the county courthouse, where he requested one specific document that would flip the HOA's scheme upside down. A document Beverly never expected anyone to find. The county clerk handed Eli the document in a plain brown envelope, stamped public records, certified copy. He didn't say a word as we walked back to the truck. Dana sat in the back seat, clutching her tote bag like a grenade was inside. "What's in it?" I asked. Eli started the engine. Proof Beverly broke her own rules. He drove in silence, straight-backed, scanning every rearview mirror. It was something the military had taught him, to always know your exits, to stay aware. And now that instinct was about to dismantle the very people trying to destroy our family. That night, Eli laid the folder on our dinner table and opened it up. Inside was a map of Sycamore Valley Ranch, a long HOA charter, and a building permit history going back 20 years. Right there, highlighted in yellow, was Beverly Morgan's property. And next to it, non-conforming structure, grandfathered without updated HOA registration. I leaned in. Wait, does this mean her house isn't up to code? Eli nodded. Not just that. It means she's lived here for over 15 years without registering changes to her backyard shed, her security gate, and the extra guest house she rents on Airbnb. Dana gasped. She's been finding us for a mailbox while she's running an illegal guest house? She's violated half the HOA charter, Eli said. It was the perfect ammunition, and we were about to go to war with paper and truth. 3 days later, the final removal hearing was scheduled. This time, they moved the location to the community park. Probably because the last meeting had been so chaotic, they wanted room for a crowd. And oh boy, did one show up. Veterans, journalists, neighbors, even someone live streaming with a drone overhead. A folding table was set up under a tent for the board members. Beverly, looking like she had slept in hairspray, adjusted her pearls and tapped the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, she began. We are gathered today to ensure the peace and values of our community remain intact. The Walkers have made national news, not because of their virtues, but because of an incident that endangered lives and disrupted our unity. The crowd murmured. The man in the cheap black uniform had a smirk on his face. He held the pistol sideways, just like in the movies. His badge, which wasn't even metal but plastic, hung from a lanyard around his neck like a toy from a cereal box. Get on your knees, punk, he shouted, standing in front of my son like he thought he was a real cop. But the man had no idea who he was talking to. My son didn't move. His arms stayed loose at his sides. His eyes, cold, calm, sharp, locked onto the weapon. That's when the HOA officer made a huge mistake. He flicked the safety off. Click. And at that moment, my son moved. Faster than I could blink. Faster than the fool holding the gun could react. My son stepped in, twisted the man's wrist, and snapped his arm back with a crack. So loud, neighbors screamed from their porches. The gun fell to the dirt. The officer collapsed to his knees, crying. But my son, my boy, stood there like a statue, calm. Like this wasn't the first time he had to disarm someone. Because it wasn't. He used to do this for a living. But nobody in this neighborhood knew that. Not even the HOA board. And especially not the man who just learned the hard way what happens when you pull a weapon on a retired Special Forces soldier. Before anyone could react, we all heard sirens in the distance. Someone had called the cops. My heart dropped. My son could be in serious trouble, even though he didn't start it. And then the real story began. 3 weeks earlier. We had just moved into Sycamore Valley Ranch, one of those gated communities that promises peace and luxury, but hides a toxic HOA behind trimmed bushes and fake smiles. It was supposed to be a fresh start. My wife, Dana, was recovering from chemo. We wanted a place where the air was clean and the nights were quiet, somewhere we could hear birds, not traffic. My son, Eli, had just left the military after 12 years in Special Forces. He didn't talk much about what he'd seen, and honestly, we didn't ask. We were just happy he was home, safe, strong, and alive. Eli helped us move in, set up the fence, painted the shed, even fixed the old mailbox. He was the kind of guy who would quietly rake leaves for an elderly neighbor without saying a word. But not everyone liked him, especially not the HOA. It started with a note, not a conversation, not a knock. Just a yellow paper folded on our front porch that read, "Your son has been observed walking shirtless around the property. This is not in keeping with HOA dress code standards. Please address this." He was shirtless because it was 98 degrees, and he was mowing our lawn. We laughed it off. Dana said, "If that's their biggest complaint, we're doing fine." But the notes kept coming. Then it became fine. Then visit. It escalated so fast it didn't even make sense. They complained Eli was intimidating because of his build. They said his military license plate was too aggressive. They even fined us $500 because Eli put up an American flag on a pole near the fence. He's a decorated veteran. I snapped at the HOA lady one day. That's not the issue, she said coldly. This is a community of peace and order. We don't need military propaganda. Propaganda? That word rattled in my brain for days. We tried to keep Eli calm. He never yelled, never even replied to their nonsense. But you could see the tension in his jaw. He'd seen real threats, real war zones, and now he was being harassed because of a flag and a bare chest. Still, he kept his cool, until the man with the badge showed up. His name was Rick Sanders, a self-appointed security officer for the HOA. He wasn't a real cop. He wasn't even licensed security. But he wore tactical boots and mirrored sunglasses and carried a fake ID clipped to his hip, like he was part of the SWAT team. The HOA had apparently voted to hire him after a board member's mailbox got kicked over. Yes, a mailbox. Rick took his job very seriously. He patrolled the neighborhood like a military base, eyeing everyone like a suspect. Eli tried to stay out of his way, until the day Rick knocked on our door and said Eli was a threat to community safety and needed to be evaluated. Evaluated? Dana almost fainted. Rick claimed he saw Eli walking down the street late at night, scoping houses. Eli had just been on a jog. Rick demanded we submit background checks to prove Eli wasn't a risk. That was the final straw. We wrote to the HOA, threatened legal action, demanded they back off. They didn't respond. Instead, they escalated. That's what led to the moment Rick pulled a gun on Eli in broad daylight. Apparently, he claimed Eli was resisting a stop. Resisting? Rick didn't even have legal authority to stop a bicycle, much less my son. But he wanted power. He wanted control. And he picked the wrong man to threaten. Just as the cops arrived on the scene, neighbors flooded the street. Cameras were everywhere. Phones in the air. Social media was already lighting up. Rick, whimpering on the ground with a broken wrist, tried to tell the cops he was the victim. He claimed my son attacked him. He went for my weapon. Rick cried. "Sir," the officer said, "you're not allowed to have a weapon. This isn't even registered." Dana shouted from a porch. He pulled a gun on my son. Eli stood quietly, hands at his sides. "Can you confirm that, sir?" the officer asked him. Eli didn't flinch. The man pulled a firearm on me. I disarmed him. No further force was used. Another officer looked at the body cam footage and nodded slowly. "We got it all. It's clear." But then, the HOA president showed up, in a golf cart, and she wasn't here to help. The HOA president stepped out of her little golf cart like she was walking onto the stage of a courtroom drama. Her name was Beverly Morgan, a slim, sharp-faced woman in her late 60s with perfectly styled silver hair and a voice that always sounded like she was about to say, "I'm disappointed in you." She wore a blue power suit with kitten heels and oversized sunglasses that made her look like she ran the Pentagon instead of a sleepy HOA in Sycamore Valley Ranch. The moment she spotted Rick on the ground with his arm twisted and sobbing, she gasped loud enough to startle a squirrel nearby. "Who did this to him?" she screeched. The police tried to calm her down, but Beverly didn't care who she interrupted. "I want someone arrested," she snapped, pointing at Eli like he'd vandalized a church. The lead officer stood firm. "Ma'am, your security officer just illegally pulled a firearm on an unarmed civilian." "Unarmed." Beverly spat, pulling her sunglasses off and glaring at Eli. "That man is a weapon." The crowd murmured. Dana, standing next to me, clutched my arm so hard I thought she might break it. The neighbors were frozen, watching, filming, whispering. "You can't arrest Rick," Beverly shouted. "He's HOA security." The second officer stepped forward. With no license, no permit, no authority, and no brain clearly. That made a few people snort quietly. I could feel the tension building. Beverly wasn't going to let this go. And she wasn't just angry, she was embarrassed. Her HOA soldier had been put down like a bug in front of the entire community. And worst of all, the videos were spreading online. Eli stood still, calm, unreadable. But I could tell this was far from over. Later that night, we sat around the dinner table in silence. Eli had barely touched his food. Dana poked at her mashed potatoes like they had insulted her. "I don't trust that woman," she finally said. "I don't trust any of them," I replied. "They're not done." Eli raised his head. "They're scared." We looked at him. He didn't sound angry. He sounded like someone who had seen this before. Not here, in war zones. Places where power makes people do desperate things. "They're going to try and flip the story," he added. "They'll say I'm dangerous, that I'm a threat." "But that's insane," Dana said. He gave her a sad smile. "So he pulled a gun on me." The next morning, a new note showed up. This one wasn't folded. It was taped to our door in red ink and all caps. "Your son is a public menace. The HOA board will be voting on your family's removal." Below that was the HOA letterhead, but no signature. We weren't just being harassed anymore. We were being targeted. I stormed into the HOA office that afternoon, a tiny trailer at the back of the clubhouse, and demanded to speak with the board. "Mr. Walker," the receptionist said in a voice sweeter than syrup, "you'll need to submit a formal request for a hearing." "I want answers now," I snapped. She gave a practiced smile. "That's not how this community works." That word again, community. The place was starting to feel more like a cult. 2 days later, we received an emergency HOA notice on pink paper. Special HOA meeting called. Motion to revoke residency based on community safety violations. All homeowners encouraged to attend. They were trying to vote us out. And the worst part? They could. Some clauses buried in the HOA charter allowed the board to push for expulsion if a resident was considered a persistent threat to neighborhood peace. Peace. That's what they called fear. Eli didn't blink when I showed him the letter. He simply said, "Let them try." But I saw the sadness in his eyes. He had fought for this country, bled for it. He trained to keep people safe, people like Beverly, like Rick. And now, back home, he was being treated like a criminal. I wanted to scream. Instead, we prepared. Friday came fast. The clubhouse was packed. Neighbors in lawn chairs. Others lean against walls. Phones in the air, some live streaming the event. Everyone smelled the drama coming like a thunderstorm. At the front sat the HOA board, 5 members, all dressed like they were about to host a dinner for the governor. Beverly sat in the middle, her lips pressed into a line. Eli stood with us near the back, quiet, calm, tall. Beverly tapped the microphone. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. As you may have heard, there was a serious incident involving a weapon, and one of our residents, Mr. Eli Walker." The room shifted uncomfortably. "We regret to inform you that our security officer, Rick Sanders, was injured during what appears to be a violent altercation. As such, the board has reviewed multiple reports and community complaints and determined that Mr. Walker poses an ongoing threat to this neighborhood's sense of safety." I shot up from my seat. "He didn't do anything wrong." Beverly gave me a plastic smile. "Sir, you'll be allowed to speak shortly. But for now, please sit." My blood boiled. Dana looked ready to march up and knock her out cold. Eli didn't move. "Tonight," Beverly continued, "we are voting to issue a formal removal recommendation for the Walker family. As per the HOA charter, a 2/3 vote among present homeowners will result in a binding action. You may now speak." The microphone was placed on a stand. No one moved. Then Eli walked forward. His boots echoed across the tile. He didn't touch the mic. He just looked around the room. "My name is Eli Walker. I served 12 years in the United States Special Forces. I have been to war zones. I've protected this country, and I've watched brothers die for people they didn't even know." The room was silent. "I came here to help my family, to rebuild, to rest." He looked right at Beverly. "And I have been treated like a threat, for mowing the lawn, for flying my flag, for jogging at night." He took a step closer to the board. "A man pulled a gun on me. I didn't punch him. I didn't break his jaw. I disarmed him without killing him. Because I was trained to do that. Because I have discipline. Because I respect life. People murmured. Eli nodded at them. If that makes you afraid of me, then maybe you are the problem. Not me. He stepped back. Beverly adjusted her blouse and coughed. Thank you, Mr. Walker, she said. The vote will now begin. She looked out over the crowd. All in favor of removing the Walkers from this neighborhood, please raise your hand. There was a pause. And then one hand. 2, 3. I held my breath. 4, 5, 6. But then someone said, wait. Everyone turned. It was old Mr. Henderson from Lot 14, the man Eli helped when his truck broke down. Then Miss Carla, who Eli had once fixed a broken gutter for. Then the Gonzalez kids' mom, who smiled at Eli every morning. And one by one, hands dropped, until it was only Beverly and 2 others with their hands raised. Beverly's eyes went wide. She had lost. But she wasn't done. She stood up and grabbed the mic. This is not over. We still have legal options. He's dangerous. You people just don't see it. A man shouted from the back, we see just fine, Beverly. And then someone else, you're the problem. Phones were up. Cameras live. And then, suddenly, Rick Sanders stormed into the room, with a cast on his arm, holding a paper. His eyes were red. And what he said next changed everything. The room went dead silent as Rick Sanders limped into the clubhouse hall. He looked awful. Bandages up to his elbow, arm in a sling, hair a mess. The once cocky, swaggering HOA officer now looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. He was gripping a wrinkled document in his good hand, waving it in the air like it held the secrets of the universe. I have proof, he barked, his voice raw and hoarse. Proof that this man, Eli Walker, is not who he says he is. Gasps filled the room. Dana reached for my hand. Eli didn't flinch. Rick hobbled to the front like some wounded villain in a cheap movie. I did some digging, he hissed. Military records. Online databases. Connections. You don't just get that kind of training and walk away. There's more to him. I know there is. He slammed the paper onto the HOA board's table. Beverly snatched it up, her eyes lighting up like it was Christmas morning. This document, she said, lifting it for everyone to see, proves that Mr. Walker served in classified operations overseas. Some of these details have been redacted, which means there's something being hidden. That's because it's classified, I snapped. But Beverly grinned like she'd won a jackpot. Classified or not, it confirms that he's more than just a regular citizen. He's been trained for violence, for war. And you all saw what he did to poor Mr. Sanders. Poor? Everyone had seen Rick draw a gun. But Beverly had a new plan, and she was going full throttle. She pointed dramatically. This man is a military asset. He should not be living in a quiet, peaceful neighborhood, full of children and families. Who knows what trauma he's hiding? What damage could he cause?